Hi everyone, this is Jennifer for Breaking Bio. I'm with Dr. Louisa Ponnampalam. She is the chairperson and co-founder of MareCet. They are an organization based in Malaysia doing a lot of marine work. You go by Louisa, correct? You don't mind if I... Okay. Never quite sure. So Louisa, would you mind going into the work that MareCet is doing in Malaysia?
So, in a nutshell, we are a local grassroots NGO, which I co-founded with a friend of mine. His name is Viral, in 2012. And we are a nonprofit, non-governmental organization. And we are focused on the research and conservation, primarily of marine mammals in Malaysia and the conservation of their habitats. We work mainly with small coastal cetaceans. So cetaceans are the scientific grouping of whales, dolphins, and porpoises, and as well as the endangered dugong. We are also about to embark on a project on baleen whales, namely the Brutus whale, yeah, which we've never done before. But all our work to date has focused on dolphins and dugongs. So we do research with the aim that our research is conservation driven, meaning that whatever we gather from the research, we use to put towards education programs, outreach activities. We contributed to national policy documents, and we use it to spread awareness for the general public. So we use what we learn. We assess populations, we assess their conservation needs, and we tailor it to what we need to do for conservation of not just the animals, but of their habitat. Because often, for example, in Malaysia, marine mammals are protected by law. So under the law, it is illegal to hunt, kill, keep, trade, etc. of these animals. But to a much lesser degree, there isn't specific protection for most of their core habitats around the country. Yeah, so that's what we focus on.
And then MareCet is also the first marine conservation organization in Malaysia. Am I correct? Am I remembering?
MareCet is the first marine mammal conservation NGO in Malaysia. Yeah, marine mammal focused. So we do have other organizations that work on other aspects of marine conservation. So our niche is mainly marine mammals. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that at the WCN Expo, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool!" And again, really exciting to see fellow Asian conservationists out doing things, in a quote unquote native habitat. So that's always really awesome. And then, would you mind telling everyone your background and how you got, pulled into conservation?
Well, I've told the story many times, and I told it at the WCN Expo as well. But basically, this is all comes from childhood. Childhood dream. As a kid, we would spend a lot of our school holidays by the sea. My dad had work projects along the coast, along our east coast. So he would bring us along on school holidays. And I think from a very young age, I fell in love with just being by the seashore, the lapping of the waves against my toes, my little toes at the time. And I knew from a very young age that I was not necessarily going to be cut out for working with just within like an office setting or a corporate setting. I knew that I'm a bit of a wild and free spirit, so I always knew that I needed to be sort of out there in the elements. When I was about 10, my mom showed me a newspaper article which had a photograph of a diver hovering above this big table coral. And I think the caption said something like a marine biologist is inspecting the coral reef or something along those lines. And I said to my mom, I want to be a marine biologist. But when you're 10, you don't really understand what being a marine biologist means. You just think, oh, that looks very cool. But that sort of stuck. And when I went to secondary school or high school, as you guys call it, by the time I was 13, I grew this obsession, this unexplainable obsession with dolphins. till today, I can't explain why. I just think they spoke to my heart. They were very charismatic, and everyone who knows me well and who remembers me from, my teenage years, will remember me as the dolphin girl. I had everything dolphin, from my head to my toe, like things that I would wear, things that I would buy. I had dolphin placemats, t-shirts, mugs, toys, everything, you name it. And even my desk in school had pictures torn out from, like last year's calendar that was all about dolphins. Yeah, and then along with that obsession with dolphins, I grew this interest in being in Hawaii. And so I said, okay, I want to study dolphins. I want to be that cool researcher that I see on TV, and I want to go to Hawaii. I don't want to just go there for a short holiday and have to come home. Why not, live there for a little while? So I set my mind to wanting to be a researcher, and who would go off to Hawaii to, gain an education in marine science. So off I went, and I did my undergraduate degree at UH Hilo on the Big Island in Hawaii, to get a degree in marine science. And then after that, I went on towards doing my PhD. So again, I really pursued this sort of dream quite ferociously, if I might say. When everybody was busy trying to finish high school, preparing for like our big sort of high school examination, which is what you need to graduate and move on with life. I was busy applying to university and bugging my teachers for letters of recommendation. I didn't even have a backup plan. I just applied to the one place in Hawaii, and I said, okay, if I don't get in, I'll figure it out. But I was just really focused. Yeah, and so when I finished, I moved on and I sought out a postgraduate degree to do dolphin research. So that was about the year 2004, when I embarked on a PhD to study dolphin ecology in the Sultanate of Oman. So I worked in the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea, looking at spinner dolphins predominantly. That took me about a good 5 years before I finished. Yeah. So that was me, like, okay, I've gotten my degree in marine science. I've gone on to get my training to become a legit dolphin scientist, and it was always my plan to return home. I was also on a Commonwealth scholarship where they encourage recipients to return home to their native country to contribute. So it fitted well with my plan, because it was always my plan to go overseas, get my education, get my training, and then return home to sort of establish this form of work in my home country. So in a big nutshell, that's how it went.
Yeah, I remember, I had a dolphin phase when I was growing up. I think I've always been obsessed with animals. Like, you talk to my parents, my relatives, there's always some story of me with animals, and so it was kind of inevitable for me to go into conservation too. Like, it was just a progression, started with one thing, then morphed into another, and now it's kind of like, I love everything, so let's go protect everything. And so yeah,
I think nature is amazing. Yeah, I think nature is amazing, and it's really worthy of us, loving it. And I think we need more of that for sure. Especially now we live in a world that's in crisis and needs a lot of help. And I always tell people now, it's not just about caring about the environment. Because of the environment, of course, but I think the easier approach, at least for a species that's a little bit or quite, I would say, self-centered, that we should care about our future, and I think caring about our future means needing to care about the environment around us, and so everything would fall into place if we just did that. So yeah, no, I think it's great that we have a shared passion for wildlife and conservation.
Yeah. And then what do you, I mean, obviously that's one of the big hurdles, right? Is just getting people to care about the environment and conservation. And so what are some of the things that MareCet does to kind of help encourage that?
So one of the things that I was quite naive, coming home to Malaysia, because in the West there is a huge passion for whales and dolphins, seals
Mm-hmm.
and sea lions, and all marine mammals. I think in the U.S. marine mammals, sit at the heart of many people's interest and passion.
Mm-hmm.
And having spent a big chunk of my tertiary education overseas, of course, that was what I was exposed to. And I think when I first returned to Malaysia, I was naive in thinking that everybody at home here was like that,
Mm-hmm.
that everybody thinks dolphins are cute, cuddly, and charismatic, and everyone is sort of interested in them. And I had to learn the hard way that actually that wasn't the case. That a lot of people are more familiar with sea turtles and coral reefs, definitely. And I think dolphins, dugongs, whales, are to a lesser extent. People are less aware about them here, um, and and as a result, people don't. I mean, they don't occupy people's thoughts, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one of the things that I found myself and Farrell, we found talking to people, is that there is a perception that whales and dolphins don't occur in Malaysia.
Mm.
So when I say what I do, a lot of people will say, "Oh, I was just in Florida last month. I was just in Australia last month. I went dolphin watching." Um, and they didn't know that they could, that there are dolphins here in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
And some people even have the perception that dolphins and whales are only live in cold water, so they're not found in tropical waters, which is what we have. And so any dolphin that was seen here might have been a vagrant or lost from somewhere in from colder waters. Yeah, so I think building up that awareness has been quite a challenge, because when people are not aware, when they don't know, how do you care about something you're not really aware about, or
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't occupy your brain space at all, right?
Right.
So I think that was one of the challenges. Like, oh, actually, I'm kind of, not to say alone, but I'm like a minority in this, and that like I have this deep passion for marine mammals that isn't shared by the large majority. Um, so I think building up that awareness in itself, never mind all the conservation issues or the threats, but just building up that I information and presence about dolphins and whales and dugongs in Malaysia was one of the first things we had to do. And I must say that we still have a lot of work to do
Mm-hmm.
in doing that. I think picking people's interest is something that we really still need to work on quite a bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then aside from that, what have been the other biggest challenges you've had just starting MareCet?
Well, for starters, I think when Firel and I first, mooted the idea between ourselves to start MareCet, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. I mean, both him and I, both him and I were interested in marine mammals as kids. Our journeys are a little bit different with some similarities, but we both had this dream about doing marine mammal work in Malaysia. So that's how we connected, and we found, oh, okay, we are aligned in those goals, and that's how we came to work together. And I think when we first said, okay, let's do, let's set up something that we can work, where we can build up the portfolio of marine mammals in Malaysia, because we saw the need for it. You know, I think one of the biggest challenges was uh, knowing how to go about it. Number one. Number two, there were quite a number of people who actually tried to discourage us from doing it. They would say, oh, there are already all these other big NGOs in the country working on environmental conservation. Why don't you just join them? Why reinvent the wheel? You know, Or some people actually said to us, it's hard. Do you even know what you're doing? You're never going to succeed. Where are you going to get funding from? Who's gonna appreciate your work? So a lot of negative things were said to us to sort of discourage us from going on this journey of establishing our very own organization that was very focused on a certain mission, on a certain taxa of a group of animals. But we said, nope, this is a dream that we've both had separately for a long time. And we believe that Malaysia needs this. Our marine mammals needs it. The marine environment needs it. And we want to be able to taking information and awareness from what we know, what works, and what doesn't work, taking examples from other organizations' successes and failures and shortcomings. We wanted to merge all of that into MareCet to ensure that we don't repeat what we already know doesn't work and build upon what we believe can work, what we believe should work. And so yeah, I think just skepticism was one of the big challenges because we were young, naive, had these dreams. And then, of course, when somebody tells you that you're going to fail, that you're never going to succeed, who's going to fund you, it's just all going to sink to the bottom, immediately. Of course, you're going to feel discouraged at first. But we said, you know what? We believe in it enough that let's just go for it. And I'm really glad that we didn't listen to the naysayers and the people who were negative. I'm very, very fortunate that my family has never been unsupportive from day one. Even as a kid, they were like, my parents were not very sure about this crazy dream that I had, but they wanted to support me in any way that they could, as long as I knew what I was doing. My dad would say to me, you have one shot at this, and we're sending you off to gain your education, so make it count, make it worth it. And so I did. So then, of course, the next challenge setting up MareCet was, I think, establishing our name. I mean, we were nobody. Nobody knew who we were. Both him, Fairul, and myself had just returned from years of studying abroad, so we didn't have any contacts locally, and we were fresh off our degrees. So I think building that name, building that portfolio, and again in an area where that was hardly tapped into in Malaysia was quite a challenge because again, we would always have to explain ourselves, who we are, what we do, why we're doing what we're doing, why it's important. And then, there would still be people that would say, oh, why don't you just join forces with so-and-so? They're already doing it. They've been doing it for years. And we'd have to explain ourselves. No, but, we're coming from a different angle. We're very focused on a specific group of organisms, which requires specific skill sets to tackle, undertaking the work. So I think building up the portfolio, knocking on people's doors, making connections with the relevant government agencies that we definitely needed to work with, was a bit of a challenge at first. And of course, funding. As I mentioned during the WCN talk, we had no money. We didn't want to have to go borrow from our parents. And so we spent 6 months collecting junk from everybody, pots, pans, plates, clothes, books, stereo sets, whatever, right? Headsets, anything that we could sell at a garage sale, we just collected it from people who were willing to give it away to us, things that they no longer wanted. And over a 3-day period, we raised about $1,500 equivalent to sort of open our bank account. And then we worked really hard in the first year to apply for research grant money to establish our projects, and to get things going, and slowly recruited our army of volunteers, which now after 9 years, we have a huge pool of volunteers. Some of them are really amazing recurring volunteers. So I think just establishing ourselves, even for me, I think coming back to Malaysia for me personally was not a difficult thing to do. I mean, it was always the plan, but again, I came in with sort of like a bushy-eyed, rose-tinted glasses approach. I just thought, all right, I'm here, I'm qualified, I'm Malaysian, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna make it. People are gonna be welcoming with open arms. But what I found was that wasn't the case. I was 26 at the time, and so I was 26. I had a PhD. So I'm young, I'm female, and I think breaking onto the scene, especially, making connections with, our local authorities, wasn't always easy. It can be quite a male-dominated scene, and I think I was everything that they didn't quite like.
Oh no.
So I think breaking that glass ceiling took a while. It was challenging. It was demotivating sometimes. And people said mean things sometimes, but I persisted because I told myself, I've dreamt of this for too long to walk back. I've given too much of my life coming up to this point to look back. And so the only way was forward. If I fell back, I had nothing. So I had to persist. And of course, with Viral as well, we both persisted together. And yeah, 9 years on, we have a team. We finally have an office space. We have multiple projects. We've built a name for ourselves. I'm very proud of that. We've individually and collectively, been recognized with uh, national and international awards. I don't want to brag, but it's sort of like just coming from nothing. It's really a source of pride for all of us. Yeah.
Validation.
So yeah, because there were days in the early days when I was like, can I really carry through with this? Can I really break this glass ceiling? Can I really push through with all the challenges of, getting people to take us seriously, getting people to recognize our expertise and utilize it, because we were here to help build our nation. We wanted to contribute. So would people accept us, because we want to contribute, but will people accept that contribution? And just building up enough of a support system, a team, uh, of course, Farrell and I are two people, we can't do everything. And one of the things that I wanted MareCet to be was to be a platform for budding local talent who had interest in marine conservation, who had interest in marine mammal research. So, we were building something from nothing. And I was fortunate in that I had family support to make that dream happen. But not everybody is so lucky. And so it was important that MareCet not only is a conservation and research organization for marine mammals, but that it acted as a platform to build local capacity, to provide other kids who maybe have the same dream as us, but maybe did not have the opportunities to grow that dream as I have had or as Viral has had. So so basically it was doing all these things, from nothing, and sometimes working in a void, and wondering, will we ever get anywhere? Yeah, but here we are, and we've gone all over the world, and we have a network of international, regional, and national collaborators. And myself, I've been providing mentorship to young and emerging conservation leaders within Southeast Asia. So to colleagues who, again, need guidance and help. So we've been doing that. So I think the dream that I had of just being a dolphin scientist has unexpectedly blossomed into something so much more. And of course, along the way, I've had to learn what conservation really means. Because I thought that, for the rest of my life, I'll be doing research on dolphins, and I don't know, shout out in the crowd, save the dolphins. But of course, that's not what conservation is, and I've had to learn that along the way, that it's about engagement with people on the ground, whether it's local communities, whether it's government, whether it's the public, your immediate team, your immediate circle of friends and family. It's all about that. It's a lot about dealing with people, and using, and these animals, they're the subject of your conservation, but they're really the catalyst, the platform from which you justify why you need to do this work in the first place. So these dolphins and dugongs, they act as our mascot for conservation, our flagship. Yeah, so I've had to learn a lot of that, a lot of learning curves, still learning. Running an organization that's growing every day is a constant learning process. I've had to, of course, learn to cope with failure and acknowledging that failure is okay, and learning from those. Sometimes I beat myself up a little bit about these failures, but then there comes a point that you gotta sort of gather yourself and say, okay, it's time to move on and make it better. I think leading an organization as well, always being conscious of what good leadership is about, and ensuring that I am a fair leader, a reasonable leader, and that I am providing enough opportunities to the people under my wing to grow and to have the same learning experiences and opportunities that I've had in the lead up to being where I am today.
That's so awesome.
Spoken so much and just kept on talking.
No, but it's fantastic. No, it's fantastic. No, and you've packed in so much good advice. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I think that aspiring conservationists need to hear, that failure is okay. It happens. You have to learn from it and move on. You can't stew on it, because then you just go down the rabbit hole and you get nowhere, and you just gotta pick yourself up and just keep moving. I mean, yeah, that's definitely something that a lot of people don't acknowledge, that sometimes things go wrong. You lose equipment, something breaks. I mean, okay, how do you adjust? How do you adapt to that situation? How do you move on? So it's definitely a very important skill to have.
Our team, back in 2014, our team, 5 years ago now, our team was in the field, and we experienced an unfortunate capsize incident.
Oh, goodness.
I actually wasn't there. I was in San Francisco at the time, attending a meeting. I woke up that morning to a text message on my phone from an unknown number, but it was my team member, Vivian, and she had found somebody's phone in the village to text me to say, this is not this is a real Mayday situation. It's not a fraud, and she explained what had happened, and that she had gone off to go seek help, and the others were still out there at sea. My heart just sank, because I was far from home. There was no way to contact any one of them. My immediate thought was, is everybody okay? What happened? So what happened was they were doing survey. They were not very far from shore. They weren't in very deep water, but the weather was a little bit rough. The wind sort of picked up. It wasn't the worst sort of weather conditions we'd been out in, but just for some reason, it was just an unlucky day, and the boat tipped over and capsized. And I think after 12 hours, everybody finally, after swimming across several rivers, trekking across the mangrove forest, they got to safety, and they were picked up by fishermen, and, they were given medical help that they needed, etc., and everybody survived. We did lose a lot of our equipment. So, and again, coming from a small organization, every piece of equipment is worth a lot of money for us. Yeah, and to raise that money again to get get that equipment back was going to be a lot of effort. But two things I wanted to mention here is that one is that the team, Vivian, who was leading that survey, she pulled herself together, and she led the team to safety. And I think one of the things I was very proud about was, after all that, when I returned to Malaysia, I spoke to her about it. Of course, everybody was very traumatized by the incident, but when I spoke to Vivian about it, and I said, has this incident made you not want to continue on this path of doing this sort of work because you don't think it's worth it, because it's not safe or dangerous? And she just simply said to me, she said, no, didn't even cross my mind. It happens. And no, I'm committed to continuing in being in this field. And that really warmed my heart, because that showed to me that here is somebody who has grown into really being committed and dedicated to this cause of doing research and conservation work, and being exposed out in the elements. And it was a sign that that level of commitment, was not easily faded away or wiped away by, such a tragic and unfortunate event. So that was a very proud moment for me, knowing that I had team members who were really, were in it for the long haul. And of course, when we capsized, a lot of friends mobilized to do online fundraising for us to recover back the funding so that we could replace, our main equipment, cameras, GPSs, binoculars, and those kinds of things. And that really warmed my heart, because the support given to us was immense, and I never expected it to come in that way and in such a big volume. So it was very encouraging. And I always say that we've gone through a lot of hardship, and we can, we live to tell the tale of a capsize incident. And I think people just need to realize that bad things can happen sometimes, but there are good people out there to help you, and that it's okay to sort of rise from the ashes, to rebuild. And I think a lot of people think, at least in Malaysia, I think a lot of people think that conservation is maybe not a very important field to work in. Maybe also easy. So I think there's a big perception that, we sip pina coladas every day and sunbathe on the beach, maybe swim with dolphins.
Goodness.
But of course, so much more goes into that. I spend a lot of my time at the desk, doing desk work, dealing with people. And I think the key is to understand that to work in conservation is to just give it your all and to work really hard. I find nowadays that a lot of young people have their hearts in the right place. They are interested in conservation and they want to contribute. And they are very inspired by successful people, or people who have become very successful in this field, who have become a beacon and an icon of inspiration and hope for conservation and for the planet. But I find sometimes that people can get carried away in that awe, and in that awe of aspiring to be like these icons, we forget about the true intention of why we do conservation. And I sometimes it almost becomes about fame or credit or glamour. And I always tell young people who come to me for advice or for input about a career in conservation, I'll always say that if you want to become famous, go to Hollywood, get an audition. This is not the field to become famous. Some people do become famous for the right or wrong reasons, through the right or wrong way, whatever. But I would like to just say to all aspiring researchers and conservationists out there that do your work and do it well, do it with the purest of intentions, and people will notice. You don't have to sort of wave yourself and other people's faces. That if you just do your work well, and do it because of the cause, because of the goal that you entered into, the rest will fall into place. And people will see that and appreciate that, and it will just sort of snowball itself from there. I think too many people obsess about demonstrating the good that they're doing for conservation, to a point that it becomes just all about that demonstration rather than actually doing the work. So I think it's important to just put it out there, coming from, a background where I, like I said, I started out just loving dolphins and wanting to do research for the rest of my life and not knowing that I would be taken on a path that would take me onto so many platforms to do so many different things for conservation, um, and where now our work is visible, but again, it wasn't because we said, hey, look at us, look at me. It was just because we, put our heads down like ostriches in the sand and just worked really hard and, letting the work speak for itself. I think that's very important. So that's very important for people coming into this field to understand. That we do it for the cause.
Not for the glamour, because a lot of the work is not glamorous.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. I think what we see on TV is really just a tenth of the reality of the struggle. No one's going to show you the struggle because no one's going to watch that. So I think, the real world is very different from what is portrayed out there. I mean, even on social media, we mostly just put the good parts of our lives on social media. You're not going to put like the tragedies of your lives or the failures. So of course, and we need to keep inspiring people. That's for sure. I think it's important to inspire, but it's also important to remain rooted and grounded. And that's what I always tell my team. I've had people who I'm mentoring say, Louisa, I want to be just like you. I want to be successful. I want to be recognized. And I said, that's great, but I want you to remember that the climb to the top is a long journey, and when you see people who are at the top or successful, you often don't see what people have gone through to get there. But I said it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of pain, sweat, and tears to be successful. Whatever success means to you, however you define it, and that being a leader at the top comes with a huge burden and responsibility. A lot of people are mistaken into thinking that as someone in a leading position, you have a lot of privilege in the sense that you can have people under you to do things for you, and maybe you have it a little easier. But actually, I think that we carry the responsibility of perception, what people perceive your organization and your work to be. We carry the responsibility of answering if anything goes wrong. Even if you yourself didn't make that mistake, somebody else in your team did, you carry that responsibility of being answerable. You carry the face of your organization. You're the spokesperson. So I always tell these young people that I'm mentoring that it's great. I want you guys all to be successful, and to achieve whatever you set out to achieve to get to the pinnacle of your targets. But never forget that it all comes with a great responsibility. So being a leader, you have to be prepared to be responsible and to lead and to pave the way for others. It's not just about yourself. So I think a lot of young people forget that. They just sort of eye the top position without understanding what comes with it. And I think it's important to know what comes with it, because not everybody could handle it. Not everybody could be ready for it. And you can fail if you have the wrong mindset coming into, what being successful means. Yeah. If that makes sense. Yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. No, I think that totally makes sense. Yeah, it's just realizing that it's more than just, I mean, yeah, it seems glamorous to be a leader, but yeah, you're right. You are responsible for all these people, and it is your responsibility to, take responsibility if there is something that goes wrong, or, all that stuff. I mean, mediating conflict and everything. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of hard work. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. And yeah, being a leader isn't easy.
Yeah. So I encourage more people to take on the challenge of becoming conservation leaders. And I would encourage them to understand what it takes. And I always say to push yourself to the edge of yourself to see what you're capable of, and ensuring that you learn from other people's mistakes, and that you set your expectations appropriately of what it means to become emerging conservation leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I know you're super busy. You've got a lot going on, field work and projects and outreach. So, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the opportunity to share my story. I hope it provides good information for anyone out there, who's thinking of a career in conservation. And yeah, so thank you for the platform to tell the story and to share my views.
Of course, absolutely. I mean, it's always great just talking with you. I mean, I heard your story at WC and I thought, wow, this is so cool. I would love to talk more with you, spread the word. And yeah, so didn't disappoint at all.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, and thanks to all our viewers. If you like our content, go ahead and click the subscribe button below the video, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks. Bye.